Hello team, and welcome back. So we'll now move on with part 2 of the sweeping saga that is the Bronco 135 Staghound build. In this video we're going to go on with a couple of figures. It's a simple base with a little bit of groundwork. Definitely have a bit of a love-hate relationship with painting figures. I got a simple process that gives moderate to fair results, just provided you don't look too close. With the Staghound I used 3 figures, 2 from Alpine and 1 from Panzer Art. Perfectly finished figures you see there are a little bit like the unrealistic male beauty standards set by social media. Let's crack on with mine. I started with a coat of SMS black primer. So usually I do zenithal highlighting, if that's the right way to pronounce it, with an airbrush. However, due to a freak 1 in 10 million chance, a glass falling off my desk snapped the regulator off my compressor. So just went for a bit of dry brushing instead to bring out some highlights. And from there I just built up the base colour in thin layers, a little bit thicker than a glaze, until I was happy with the result. You can still see some highlights and some shadows. Now onto some shadows. So I mixed the base colour with a little bit of red brown and a little bit of flat black, and this is a very broad shadow coat. So once again, built up in layers, so more layers where the shadows are going to be deeper, and any shadows that went a bit rogue I'll clean up with the next step with some highlights. And on to step 3, being highlights. If there were more than 3 steps, I'd have to write them down to remember them. We start with fairly broad highlights, just with the base colour lightened with a bit of AK decomposed flesh. Then each layer, just add a little bit more of the lighter tone and tighten the highlights in on things like top of folds and wrinkles, edge of pockets, those little bits that are going to stand out. I also did a layer of deeper shadows around the edge of pockets, zippers, and at the bottom of deep folds. But I forgot to record it. Never fear, I've recently bought a new better camera, so next figure painting video won't be so out of focus. For the shadow coat, the Sydney Sweeney brush was retired, and I got an ultra fine, we'll go peak mid-90s Mk.1 brush. For old mate crew commanders, fancy little leather jerkin, I started with a base of red brown mixed with just a touch of red leather and went through the same process. So some shadows and some highlights. I added a little bit of white to the highlights just to give it that more sort of scuff worn leather look. Pistol belt and holster were painted in decomposed flesh with a touch of khaki, and his binos in semi-gloss black, just with a little bit of a random metal tone to give him some nicks and scratches. And there we have it, one figure down. So the second bloke wearing the pixie suit, must have been a bit cold. He was painted using the same technique of base, shadows, highlights. The pixie suit I used a base coat of decomposed flesh with a touch of green brown and built from there. Decomposed flesh has to be the worst colour name in the world. Rightio, so flesh tones. So for starters, this is what triggered me to buy a new camera. because 90% of the flesh tone painting was out of focus. But I'll do a short video in the future of my process on that. There's definitely nothing to write home about, but gets passable results. So our vehicle crew is done. They're looking at home on their stag. Targets down, patch out on them, and on to making something for them to sit on. So for the base, I just used a piece of a cheap pine offcut from Bunnings. Got a snag walls there as well. Threw a couple of coats of a lacquer-based dark stain onto the pine to make it look all fancy. Did a test and adjust to make sure that the model and a little bit of groundwork and the nameplate would fit, and then cracked into getting everything laid out. So for the groundwork, I started with just a piece of AK carving foam. I love this stuff because it is resistant to thinners, paint, everything. Once she was all measured up and cut, I scored the base and attached the carving foam just with some white glue. To add a little bit of visual interest and height, I measured and cut a few more bits and added to the base, which would be the sides of the road. After everything was all dry and fixed in place, because I'm lazy, I just used a little detail sander and roughed it up a bit to make it look a bit less like 3 bits of foam stuck together. Next up, I added a thin layer of terracotta modelling clay over the foam. Before this was dry, I just pressed the vehicle down just to make some little ruts that she'd sit in so she didn't look like she was floating. But I pressed a bit too hard and snapped off 2 of the wheels while I was doing this. I found a wheel in the spares box that was roughly the same width as the Staghound wheels. It's actually a 1/35th Aslav wheel, so I used that to make the wheel tracks in the mud. And also some random tracks, just to make it look like it's a bit of a high use road. For the frame, I just used some thin balsa, attached with white glue, and held in place with thumbtacks till she dried. Once it was dry, I just filled the holes from the thumbtacks and any of the other gaps with a little bit of putty and gave her a light sand. I applied a couple of fairly dense coats of MIG acrylic muddy ground, primarily on the road, but not too thick that it covers the tracks I've made. I used ammo dry earth ground for the sides of the road and the raised bits, just because it's a little bit coarser texture. To give her a bit of colour, I started with a base coat of Tamiya flat black. After that, a few coats of AK Dunkelbraun, or dark brown, and then just builds up with lighter coats of shades of brown, concentrating more on the higher areas. Rightio, let's get a bit of greenery happening. Well, not too much greenery, but it's only early spring. I used a couple of dark green and brown static grasses, held in with a bit of white glue and applied with my fantastic $10 Temu static grass shaker thing that tends to give me the occasional minor electric shock. To make some longer dead grass, I just use some AKC grass, roughed up a bit and attached once again with a bit of white glue. I also added some pigments and a couple of oil washes to especially on the roadway, just to get a little more depth. So we've got a few mud splashes on the vehicle, so we better add a little bit of standing water. For this I used just some UV Cure resin mixed with a little bit of ink, applied it and then used a little fancy UV light to cure it, which took a lot longer than I thought. I also used some AK Wet Effects just in a few spots to make it look a bit damp and muddy. And the end is in sight. Adding some final details for the figures and wiring for the headsets. And blooper in 3, 2, 1. Donating some blood to the modelling gods. A late addition to the groundwork, I just added some little yellow flowering plant looking things, just to give it that early spring feel. The nameplate I designed on FreeCAD and printed on my Elugu 3D printer. Well team, this brings us to the end of the video and the end of our Staghound build. I hope you've enjoyed it. Next up is going to be a bit of an attempted speed build of the Tamiya 148th Bowfighter, trying to get it done for an online competition. But as always, please like and subscribe, and cue the dramatic music.